Hey, what's up? Jason here from Unity3D.college. In this video, we're going to continue on with the Unet setup, and we're going to start building a UI that we can use. The current one, if you remember from the previous video, we have just the basic setup where we can use the network manager HUD and hit LAN host, create a character, move around, and we could connect with another character. But we really don't want to use this old, ugly default UI. We want to put something a little bit nicer in, so I'm going to run you through the steps to do that. The first thing that we're going to want to do though is create a folder for our scripts and start organizing things. So just create a scripts folder, move the player mover into there, and then I'm going to create a new script, and we're going to make our own network manager. So we're going to create a C# script, call it custom network manager, and what we're going to do with this is derived from the network manager. So we're going to change from mono behavior here to network manager, and we'll add the using statement for Unity engine.networking. And then what we want to do in here is expose a way to start a hosted game. So to do that, we're going to create a public method, do public void start hosting. And in here, we're just going to call base.start host. Now, it's important to note that there are a lot of things you can override for the network manager. If you just type override, you'll see all of the different things that you can hook into. And this is kind of how you'll customize your multiplayer setup. So there's different things for starting and stopping as a host, as a client, switching scenes, getting match lists, people dropping connections, rejoining, all that stuff. You can handle that just by overriding the different base methods in this class. So we're not going to do that right now. We will eventually though. For now, what we want to do though is just hook up a button to start hosting a new game. So the first thing I need to do back in the editor is go back to my network manager and replace the existing one with our new custom network manager. So I'm just going to drop that on there. We haven't really set up much here. If you remember from the first video, all we really did was add the player. So I'm going to find the player real quick and add that as the player prefab on the new one. And then I'm going to remove the original one. There we go, just remove component. So now we're almost ready, and I'm in 2D mode, so I'm ready to start creating a UI. This is the little button to switch between 2D and 3D mode, by the way. I'm going to zoom out a little bit, and let's create a new canvas. So I'm going to go to UI, canvas, and under this canvas, I'm just going to create a button. There we go, and this is going to be our host game button. So I'm just going to rename it host game. Or I'm going to call it host match. I think I'm going to use the term match for everything. And here we'll just call this host, or type in the word host there. And we need to hook up an event. So right now you can see on click is empty for our event. We're going to start by just tying directly into the network manager, and then we're going to split it out so that we're not directly coupled to it a little bit later. But for now, we're going to get it working in the basic way. We'll just hit plus. Now we can add an object there to fire off an event. So I'll take the network manager, drop it on, and then in this function drop down, you may not be able to see it. Let's see if I shrink everything up and maybe pull this up a bunch. You might be able to see the option, but we'll hit the drop down right here, go to custom network manager, and then, oh, it's still way off on the bottom. So I'm going to choose the start hosting option. You should see it down there too. Just make sure that you went under custom network manager. Okay, so that's there. We should be able to click the button now and just start hosting. So I'm going to save, hit play, hit the button, and we should get the same behavior as when we hit the LAN host button. There we go. I got a character. I can move them around, and if I do a build, it'll still all work. Now the next important component is a list of our games so that the players that want to join a game can see the games there and click a button to join in. So to start that up, we're going to create a panel. Just go to UI and panel, and I'll resize this a little bit, shrink it down, just get it underneath the host button, and maybe just like that. Just have a nice little line there of games. And I'm going to call this game list panel, or match list panel. And then we need a script for this. So I'm going to create a new script here. I'll call this match list panel. And this is going to be responsible for handling a bunch of buttons that are underneath here that are like our join game buttons that have the name of the match, and then we can click it to join in. So we're going to need to give this thing a list of matches, and then we're also going to need to create some prefabs. I think what I want to do first is just create the buttons. So I'm just going to go under UI and choose button. Now this button is going to be our join button, so I'll just name it join button. And we're going to need a script on here as well. I'm just going to create a new script called join button. And I'm going to move both of these scripts into our scripts folder real quick. Take that one and that one, just drop them in here. Now our join button script is going to be responsible for updating the UI for our button to show the match name, and then sending off a message to our network manager to tell it to join a game when the player says to do so. So I'm going to open up the join button, and I'm just going to add a serialized field. Or do I need a serialized field? No, I'm going to add a private text. And we'll add the Unity engine.ui version, and we'll just call this text. Then in an awake method, so I'll replace start with awake, fix my formatting with Control-K, Control-D, and mark that private. In here we'll do text equals get component and children text. So we're just going to get that one text component. Now normally I'd also swap out the text with a text mesh pro text. So if you're doing this, I definitely recommend you do that. Maybe I'll do that a little bit later on. I didn't want to dive into something somewhat unrelated just because it's important and cool. But now we also need a method on here to initialize this thing. So I'm going to make a public void initialize, and we're going to need to pass in some match info. So we don't have an idea of what that's going to be yet, so we're going to have to figure that out. And then in here we'll set the text to that match info's name, and then we'll hook in to call something on the network manager again to actually join the game. All right, now we need our custom network manager to start refreshing our list of matches and give us the list so we can do something with it in our UI. So what I'm going to do here is create a method to refresh, and then we'll call it on enable, and then we'll hook up some buttons or some timers to call it more periodically. So first let's just do a private void on enable. And this just makes it easy to test because we can just disable and re-enable the object and see if it's working before we start hooking into buttons and everything else. What we're going to do is just create a call to a method. We'll call it refresh matches. So just call refresh matches and semicolon. Then I'll just generate that method. Control period to pull up the context menu to generate it again. And in here we're going to call... Well, first we want to check if our matchmaker is started. So we're doing this all with online matches first. So we'll go if network, no, we're already in the network manager. If matchmaker is equal to null, we'll call start matchmaker. And this is one of those base methods that's on the network manager here. So we're just calling it to tell it to start the matchmaker. Once that's done, what we want to do is call matchmaker.listMatches. And there are a lot of parameters here. We're going to start off with 0 for the page number. This is so if we want to get page numbers of matches, which if your game is popular, you'll probably want to do. But for the start, we'll start off with page 0, and we'll just grab the first 10. So the page size is 10. We don't need any name filtering right now, but if you want to add custom filtering, this is where you would do it. You'd pass that in. And then we also, I don't think we want to, well, yeah, let's filter out private matches. So if it's marked private, we won't show it. And then for ELO score, we'll put 0. We'll put 0 for request domain. And then what we need is a callback for when list matches completes. The way this is going to work is we're going to call into list matches, and then when it's done, it's going to call a method that we give it. So I'm going to call this handle match or handle list matches complete, just like that. And now we'll generate that method again. Control period to bring up the context menu. And you can see we've got this method here. Let me kind of shrink some of this stuff down, get it out of the way. There we go. So now we've got handle matches complete. Let's just split these out so you can see them easily. And you can see we've got a success, some extended info, and the list of match info snapshot. So that's what we're going to use in the join button temporarily. So we've got this method right here, and in this method we need to do something with this data. We want to update our UI. We also kind of want to cache this list of data so that way when we update the UI in the future, it's a little bit cleaner. And I really don't want to do all this in custom network manager. I don't want to add the responsibility of keeping track of our available game list to a class that already has plenty of responsibility on its own. So what I'm going to do is create a new class, and I've actually got it right here, available matches list. So just right click in here, hit add, choose class, it's right off the side, and name it available matches list. And here you can see we've just got a static class called available matches list, and we're going to give it a method. Let's go down in here though before we do. Let's do it this way. We'll go available matches list dot what do we want to call this? Let's think about I'm gonna go with handle new match list, and then we'll pass in response data. Now right now I'm ignoring the possibility of getting a failure here. We're just gonna assume that it's always successful. If we want, we could check this and then do a log, but it's not super important for this. So I'm gonna create that method. Now I've got this new static method here for handle new match list. And I want to do a couple things here. First, I'm going to rename this to match list. And then I want to create a private collection that we have on this class that we can access whenever we want. So I'm going to make a private list of match info snapshot. And we'll just call this matches. And we'll initialize it to a new empty list. Now, for now, what I'm going to do is just say matches equals match list. Now, again, in the future, what we're going to want to do is update this. Oh, we need to make this static. Got a red line there. What we'll want to do is update this only when there are changes. So if we do a refresh and nothing changes, we don't really want to go through a bunch of refresh code and cause our UI to update or anything else like that. So we're keeping it cached, but we're not using it just yet. We'll do that in the near future. So we've got this list here. Now I also want to add an event here. So I'm going to add a public static event action. And for the type, we're going to use list of match info snapshot. And we'll call this on matches, or let's call it on available matches changed. And I'm going to assign an empty delegate to it. So this nice empty delegate, if we call it and it's not registered for, nothing will happen. So wait, when we do this right here, on available matches changed and pass in matches, if nothing has registered for this event, we're fine. It's just going to do what's in this code right here, which is absolutely nothing. So again, right now, a little bit wasteful. We're adding it to a list and then calling another event. We're not doing a whole lot with it, but bear with me. This will make sense as we kind of build up this project. Again, we could just do this stuff in the custom network manager, but we really want to keep it kind of clean, not do all this in here. In fact, I think what I'd like to do is move some of this stuff over there shortly or into another class that's responsible for UI and refreshing. But for now, I think we're good. And we're going to go back over to our match list panel. Now in our match list panel, we don't need a start method, but we do want an awake. And I want to fix formatting. Control K, Control D fixes that up. And we'll mark that private. And then in here, I want to do available matches list dot on available matches changed plus equals, and then you just hit tab to generate the method. And what's going to happen is we're going to get a method that'll call back whenever the available match is changed. So our panel doesn't need to poll, it doesn't need to read anything, it just waits for an event that tells it when it needs to update, and then that event has the list of matches. So one thing I want to do is cut that out and just add the using statement instead. So you see now we have using unityengine.network.match instead of the big long name right there. And I want to rename this parameter to matches. Now, when we get the list, what we want to do is go through all of our buttons and update them, or initialize them. But we also need to clear out any existing buttons. So the first thing I'm going to do is clear existing buttons. So do clear existing buttons. And create that method. Now to clear these out, all we need to do is get a list of them. So just do var buttons equals get components in children. We need to make sure we get the plural one. Components in children, there we go, of join button. And then we'll loop through each button for each var button in buttons. And then here we'll just call destroy button.gameObject. So this is just going to destroy them all, and it'll clear out the list. The next frame, these will all be empty and dead, destroyed. We'll be good to go. Now, the next thing we want to do is, well, we can delete this update method. After that, we want to create new buttons. So let's call this create new join game buttons. And we need to pass in the list of matches and generate this method. Now I'm going to move this method down just so that they're in the order that they're called. I like to keep them in that order so that if clear is called, it's first, then join is called, it comes after. Now in here, we're going to need to loop through each match and create a button for it. So we'll do for each var match in matches. Then we'll do var button equals instantiate, and we're going to give it the button prefab, which we don't have yet. So let's go up here and create it. We'll go serialize field, private button, or no, play. Wait, what did we call it? Join button. Join button, and we'll call this join button prefab. There we go. Now I'm gonna put that right here. Instead of button prefab, we'll call it join button prefab. And then we want to call button.initialize. And remember, we didn't add any parameters to it. What we want to pass in is this match. So I'm just going to make it take match. And I'm going to copy match info snapshot, go to initialize with F12, and we'll add that as a parameter. Just paste it in, and oh, yep, we'll hit add the using statement so that we get unityengine.networking.match there. And then we'll name the parameter match. Now, in our initialize method, we need to set the text of this thing. So we're going to copy the text. We're going to set the text equal to, what do we want to use? We want to use the match dot, is it name? Yeah, name. Match dot name. Now I don't like text, so we're going to rename this to button text. There we go. It just feels a little bit cleaner. I don't like having the two of the same variable name right after another. Just feels dirty. And I use my shortcut to remove existing using statements, or unused using statements. Okay, so we've got that set up. We're also going to need to hook in the button click, but first let's just get these showing up. So back in the editor, what I want to do is create a folder for prefabs. I'm going to go right click, create folder, and name this prefabs. And I'm going to move my player in there, but I'm also going to take this join button and just drop it right in. Now select my match list panel and assign the join button from here. Make sure that you don't select this one because we're going to delete that. Now save, and I'm going to, let's see, we need to hit play and play, but first we need something to call our refresh. So let's go back into our custom network manager one more time. And then when we start host, well, actually we have it in on enable. Yeah, let's just play, and we'll use enable for refreshing the matches for now. So I hit play, hit host, and then I'm going to take my network manager, which moves under don't destroy on load, and I'll disable and re-enable it. And you notice that nothing changed. And there's an important reason for that, and something I really want to bring out, which is that when we're hosting right now, we're hosting a LAN game, and this method that we're calling to get the list of matches, that's for a matchmaker game. So this is the online, if we hosted it like this, so if we used enable matchmaker, hit create internet match, and then disable and re-enable it, suddenly you'll see that this is getting called, this code is hitting, and our match count right here is 1. Hit F5 and let it continue. We'll see that, oh, we should have had a button. Why didn't we not get a button? Oh, we did get buttons, but they're right up here. They're not actually attached as children. So there are a couple things that we need to fix real quick. First, obviously, we need to get these buttons underneath the panel. Pretty simple thing. We're going to set the transform parent in the initialize. But more importantly, we need to make sure that we're hosting the correct kind of match. So when we set up a internet match, it's slightly different from a LAN match. And in fact, the way that we get the list of matches is a little bit different. And I think in the next video, I'm going to go over the LAN mode version, and then we'll kind of combine everything together so that you can use LAN and internet games exactly the same in your UI. We just have to wrap a couple little things. But for now, let's get the matchmaking version totally working. So let's go back into our project view, and we need to go back to our custom network manager. So in here, right here where we're start hosting, we actually want to start hosting a matchmake game. So to do that, we're going to call, not start host, but we're going to call, oh, I got to stop. We have to call start matchmaker. And then here we have to call matchmaker dot create match, and we'll pass in a name for it. So we'll give it Jason's match. Seems like a good name. A size. So right now I'm just going to set it to about 4 players. If we want the game to be advertised, so if we want it to show up in our matchmaking list, we'll set it to true. We'll go quotes on the password, quotes on the IP, and quotes on the private address. And then we don't care about ELO scores. We don't need request domain. We do want an on match created event though. So what's going to happen is we'll create the match, and then something will call into our on match created. So I'm going to just name this on match created. If I can spell it right. And add the semicolon, and then we'll generate this method. Now what I want to do is cut this start host out here, and I want to put it down into here. But I want to call it with one of the overloads. Specifically, I want to pass in the response data. So this is going to tell it to start the match, but start it with the matchmaking setup. So now when we go back in, we should be able to play and see our game show up. But I want to fix the join button first too. So here we're initializing, and we don't really know what the parent is supposed to be. So I think what we'll do is pass that in as another parameter and then have this thing update its position. Now all we care about is the transform, so we're just going to use the transform part. So we'll call this transform panel transform. And then here we'll say transform.setParent, and we'll pass in the panel transform. And then we're just going to reset the scale, rotation, and position just to make sure they're all zeroed out. So local scale equals vector3.1, transform dot, oops, lowercase t. What have I done? There we go. Dot local rotation equals, and I set to quaternion dot identity. And then we want to set the position too, so just do transform dot local position equals vector3 dot 0, not 1, 0. There we go. So totally resetting that. Now I'm going to hit Shift F12 to pull up the references, because we know here that this initialize is not calling with the second parameter. So just go to it right there, down in my find references, and I'll pass in transform. So it's just going to pass in the match list panels transform to the button so it knows where to parent itself. Okay, so let's jump back in. Hit play one more time. And then we will host our game. And I'm going to disable and re-enable this network manager. And now you see my match has showed up. Now if I disable and re-enable it again, it's actually deleting it and recreating that. So this is partially working. There's still 2 things that I want to fix before we wrap this up though. The first is that if we get multiple matches, they're all going to show up at 0, 0, 0. That's an easy one to fix. What we'll do is go to the match list panel, and we're going to add a vertical layout group. So add a vertical layout group there. And now to test this out, what we can do is just go to our prefabs, drop the join button on the panel. There we go. And then just duplicate it. You can see we're getting buttons and they're kind of splitting out like that. They're separating. They're not in a perfect list. I'm not too worried about that. How you lay out your UI, kind of up to you. But we want to make sure that you have some kind of a layout group there so that the positions are getting updated. Ideally, you'll probably have this in a scroll view that you can scroll up and down on. Maybe I'll do a video on that part a little bit later. But we've got that working. We can now join, right? The only thing I want to do before we wrap this up is go back into the network manager and let's just call refresh matches after we host too. So whenever a match is created, we'll just call refresh just so we can see our own game. Now, one thing that we're going to want to do too is, actually, you know what? Let's kill that. Let's delete, or we can still call it there, but I think what I'm going to do is replace this on enable with an update. And in here, what we'll do is just refresh matches every some number of seconds. So we'll just do if time.time is greater than or equal to next refresh time, refresh matches. And then in refresh matches, we will set next refresh time right at the beginning in case anything goes bad, equal to time.time plus, now let's just add 5 seconds. Now next refresh time doesn't exist, so I'd use control period, and we want to generate a field. And we want that to be a float. There we go. So now the first time it calls through, it's obviously this will be 0, so the time will be greater. And then every 5 seconds after that, we'll just keep refreshing. Again, we're going to move some of this stuff out of this network manager, because right now we've got a lot of code in here that's not really a good fit for this, and it's kind of bloating this thing. But for now, I think this will work fine. So we'll hit play, and we'll host one more time. And then within 5 seconds, or actually pretty much instantly, our match shows up. So let's do a build real quick, make sure everything's good, and then we'll wrap it up and then prepare for the next video. Let's go to build settings, build, and we'll call this Unet again. Build that out, and then we'll launch it. So we've got one client right here, and we've got another one starting up right here. And then if I can get this other window up, let's see, let's drag this over here. I'll host a game. Oh, it's behind the UI, isn't it? Okay, so I'll host there, and let's see if we see it in the other window. Yep, there we go. The match showed up. So the panel is not quite correct. I have to adjust that for the screen. Maybe move this host button up. It's just some UI stuff. I think when I was playing with this, yeah, see, we tested it at a free aspect, and I really need to test it at a real resolution that I'm running at, like this 1024 by 768. I also realized that we didn't hook up the button to join, so let's do that real quick too. Okay, step one though, let's move this host button up out of the way. So we got the button there, just drag it, and just make sure that it's going to fit in our 1024 by 768. Which now it should. Save that. And then let's go back into our button. So we've got the join button. And in this button, we're going to add another method. We'll call it public void join match. And we're going to hook this up to our actual buttons on click event. And then here, what we'll do is find the network manager. So let's do find object of type custom network manager. And then we're going to call join game, and we want to pass in our match. So our button here is going to cache the match that we're using, and we're going to create a join game method on there. So let's just do that. We'll copy this, make another private field, and then in here we'll just say this.match equals match, and that's just because they have the same variable name. Just put this here to make it very explicit what's going on. So there we go. We're setting the match there. We're going to pass it in on this join call, and we'll do control period to generate that method. Now in our join match, or our join game, oh yeah, we should rename this. Let's rename this to join match. Keep it consistent. But in here, what we want to call is our matchmaker. So we want to do if matchmaker is null. We need to initialize it. We'll call start matchmaker. Remember, this is on the client, so the client may not have set up the matchmaker yet. It's just a good thing to double check, and they should have it right here, but you never know. Could be shut down. Then what we want to call is matchmaker dot join match, and we'll pass in the match dot network ID. We don't have a password. We don't have an IP. So it's blanks for all those. 0 for score. 0 for request domain. And then here we need to call like a handle joined match. Now generate a method for that. And then in this method, we just want to call start client and pass in the response data. There we go. So now we're almost done. One final little thing is that we need to hook up the join button. So we have two ways we can do that. We can either look at our prefab and go here, click, add, and then we can just drop the button right on top of itself, and then scroll down to join button and choose, where is it at? Join. Hey, I'm not seeing it. Okay, I think we might have an error here. Oh yeah, it's because I haven't fixed this. This is calling join match. There we go. I just hadn't saved my join button. So it said join match here. There's a little star there, so wasn't saved. Now if I go back in, once I can compile, there we go. Now I should be able to select the join match join match method. And this way it works. Sometimes I do it this way. A lot of time the other thing I'll do is register this all in code. Let me show you how to do that too. So just cut this. I'm just going to remove this. Like I said, if you want to use it that way, it's totally fine. It works fine, but I'm going to do it a slightly different way just to show it. So we'll make this private now, since we're not going to do it from the editor. And in awake, what we'll do is get component button dot onClick dot add listener, and we'll just pass in our method name. So this is going to do the same thing without the visual aspect of it. Now, sometimes the visual part's really nice, especially if you want people customizing these things. Here, I don't really want them to. I always just want to call into my method. So just make it easy and explicit right in the code so that it's hard to mess it up. You can't create a new version of the UI and break it, because the button always does exactly what it's supposed to do. So let's try it one more time. I think we'll do another build. Just hit build and run. There we go. We've got it up. Start it. And I'm going to start my editor version. Once that starts, I'll hit host. There we go. I've got my match there. And if we go back into here, keep getting updates. Should happen any second now. There we go. Match appeared. Again, we have a 5-second delay, so it took a little while there. And with the app's not set to run in the background, so when I didn't have it clicked, it wasn't going to update. But now I can, with luck, join the match. There we go. And I've got my character moving around. Let's just bring these up side by side. There we go. Everything just kind of works. So now we're kind of good to go. I'd say the next step would be to clean up this UI, make it not so ugly, make it disappear, and then start working on the LAN mode stuff. So again, we really want to split this up and clean it a bit so that there's an interface, like a layer in there between the matchmaking and our UI, because again, the match-made UI or the match-made games have different info, slightly different setup than LAN games, and we really want to support both nice and seamlessly. There's no reason to code a big system and then code a whole separate system for LAN games when we can kind of just make it all work as one. So I think we'll do that in one of the next Unet videos. If these are helpful, let me know. I know this one went on a lot longer than I had expected. It's probably the longest video I've shot, but hopefully it's kind of helpful and gives you a good idea of how to start setting things up. So if you like this, want to see more Unet videos, drop a comment, let me know. I'll keep building on this series, and we'll go through all of the process to set up your own custom networking stuff. And of course, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, and all that fun stuff. All right, thanks for watching.